All right, y'all, let's go over all of your questions from JJK Chapter 257, but spoilers beware. Okay, first up here, we have more of a list of theories that Garlic wanted me to react to, and I'll move out of the way for those of you that want to pause and read this whole thing since it's pretty long. But Garlic, yeah, I pretty much agree with all of these. If you've been seeing my videos I've put out recently, you would know we're in line with most of these things here, if not all of them. In fact, the only one that I haven't explicitly commented on is, where is it? Right here, where you say that potentially how Kenjaku got his hands on the twins' soul was that when he taught Sukuna how to split into 20 fingers and became those cursed objects, perhaps the twins' soul was left behind in like Sukuna's husk of a body, which I like that. I hadn't thought about that possibility, but it makes sense, some sort of kind of like underhanded deal that Kenjaku is making, and then he ended up with the twin soul. So that would explain at least how he first got his hands on it. The only thing that doesn't really check the box of is Sukuna's statement of the twin soul bounced around until it landed in Kenjaku's hands. But who's to say Sukuna would know exactly what the twin soul was up to? Does he have twin soul GPS? I don't know, but I really do like that idea. And then, yeah, as far as why Sukuna looks the way he does, the heavenly restriction thing, and Kenjaku potentially meddling in the Itadori bloodline before Kaori, I'm with you on all that. Next up, we got some family ties questions from Nick. Is Yuji Sukuna's nephew? Yes, he is, because Yuji's father is Sukuna's brother. And then, because Yuji's father and Sukuna are twins, they have the same DNA, which would make Yuji genetically Sukuna's son, because there would be no difference since it would have been the same DNA that created him. So, interesting, right? And then how did Kenjaku pass down the father's soul? We don't know yet. Next up, we got another twin question from Antoine. Let me move out of the way for anybody that wants to read, but this one focuses on heavenly restriction. So we have this blueprint with Maki and Mai, right? One has a curse technique, one is heavenly restricted. Now, that doesn't mean all twins would follow that relationship, but I think it's fair to say that Sukuna and his twin probably did because they were the same type of twins as Maki and Mai, meaning twins that share the same placenta, therefore the universe views them as one person. So they wouldn't each have a curse technique because a person can only have one under normal circumstances, right? You're only born with one. So that's why Maki couldn't have one. So similarly, this is why I don't think a lot of the theories that say, Jin's curse technique is the fire arrow or what have you, I don't think that's right because I don't think Jin could have his own unique curse technique, but he might be heavenly restricted just like Maki was, right? So that could explain why Yuji is seemingly heavenly restricted, even though that's never been like actually commented on. I've talked about this at length in previous videos, so I won't go in the weeds on it. But yeah, I think that's an explanation that makes sense. And even Sukuna, considering he consumed his twin, might be heavenly restricted and have a curse technique, which Yuji may also be that now, which is interesting, right? All right, next up, we got these questions from Sammy. And again, I'm going to move out of the way since this is a longer one. Y'all pause, feel free to read. But the first question is basically asking, how did Kenjaku plan for Mahito? Because Kenjaku, we know, has been planning for 1,000+ years, and he even enacted the final steps of his plan by giving birth to Yuji, who is now, like 15 years old or whatever. Meanwhile, Mahito is like a couple of months old. So how could he have possibly planned for Mahito to spring up when he did at the perfect time to then, launch the Culling Games? And I remember talking about this in a video once before, but I couldn't find it. But my general thoughts on this are that Kenjaku must have had another plan. Like, he must have had another way that he could have started the Culling Games. Now, what is that? How could he have created all the incarnated sorcerers and everything? I don't know. I don't have a satisfying answer, but I think based on what we're talking about here, he must have. Like, there's just no way that somebody that meticulous that had planned this for hundreds and hundreds of years was just hoping a random curse would spring up with a technique that could do exactly what he wanted. It might even be possible that Kenjaku was familiar with a previous iteration of Mahito. And it wouldn't even have to be like Mahito, but maybe just a curse that had that curse technique or something. And so he just thought, I'll be able to find one somewhere that has a technique I can use to do this. So not the most satisfying answer, but basically I think he had contingency plans. And then for your second question here about a potential Maharaga totality, man, I hope we get to see something like that, but I don't know if we will. Just ever since learning about Ten Shadows, finding out about Maharaga and how totality works, I think everyone has been wanting to see that, like just this ultra mechazoid, totality Shikigami Super Saiyan level 7. I just want to see it, So will we see it? I don't know. I do expect to see something from Megami, whether that's a completed Chimera Shadow Garden that maybe has some craziness running around in it, or, some sort of totality using Rabbit Escape or whatever he has left at this point. I'll be disappointed if we don't see any inkling of that because, again, it was just such a cool concept. It'd be a shame not to see it. Next up, we got a few questions from JC, and the first one is a quick one about Miguel in the JJK Zero movie. There's that moment where the rope or the power lines turn into snakes. What's going on there, right? Well, before these recent chapters came out, a lot of people speculated that that was just Miguel's curse technique, and we were seeing a glimpse of it. But now that we know what Miguel's curse technique is, it has nothing to do with that. So I think that was just like artistic license from the animators. I don't have a better answer than that, unfortunately. But then JC's second questions down here are, do you think Yuji can take the 4 disaster curses at once? And no, I don't. I mean, Yuji is crazy right now, right? But he still doesn't have a domain that we know of. I mean, he might, bust it out literally next chapter. But at this point, since we haven't seen him do that yet, I got to assume he doesn't have one. And I think facing 4 people that all do have one, he's just going to get overwhelmed. Like, even if he does simple domain in, the first one or whatever, and he can, withstand for a little bit, the fact that he's 4 on 1 and they all have one, I think they're ultimately going to get him. And then finally, why does Yuji's cleave look like this with the scissors? And this is because Yuji is his own person and also because he's from a different time, right? So I've talked about this some before in various videos, but, even people with the same curse technique are going to have nuanced applications of it and different domains from one another. And that's just because, the way you perceive the world affects how you interact with it. So just how you would imagine, if you took a classroom of people, gave them all the same crayons and told them to all draw a tree, all of the trees would be different, So Yuji is just utilizing this technique in the way that he envisions and the way it makes sense to him, which in some forms makes sense because, Sukuna uses it as these slashes and he's from a more barbaric, not medieval is not the right word, but a more antiquated time. Whereas Yuji, when he thinks of cutting, he's probably more likely to think of scissors. He's not out there just slamming machetes in his everyday life. That's probably how he's more familiar with the concept of cutting. So I really liked this kind of nuance from Gege, and that's my interpretation of why it is that way. And while we're on the subject, we've got this from Wilfredo and I'm Gaming about Yuji's domain expansion. And I totally think it's going to be this benevolent shrine idea. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be literally translated as benevolent shrine. Maybe it will be, but I don't think that's important. But I do think it's going to be this light mirror of Sukuna's because they have the same curse technique, right? Shrine. Now, Yuji also has blood manipulation, but more on that in a second. I think it's more poetic if Gege uses this to use that foil between them. So we will see Yuji's version of this being the opposite of Sukuna. What will that domain shape up to look like? And I think we really depends on what curse technique he imbues in the barrier, because he might not choose the cleave and dismantle like Sukuna does. Maybe he'll put blood manipulation in the barrier. Maybe he'll put fire arrow or whatever else he may have access to in the barrier. So I do think it'll be an interesting aesthetic mirror. I think there will be a shrine, but it probably won't look all evil and stuff like Sukuna's. And then, yeah, I'd be interested to see what actual effect is in it. But yeah, I do think it will be kind of this benevolent shrine idea insofar as it is the opposite of Sukuna's. And speaking of shrine, we got this question from Cameron on, could Megami get shrine since he is also soaked in Sukuna's cursed energy? And I think it's certainly possible, but maybe not the most likely, just because to me it would feel watered down if everyone was out here getting shrine. Plus, if Megami does come back, I want to see him use the 10 shadows like we were talking about earlier. And plus, Yuji was soaking in the cursed energy much longer and is related to Sukuna, so that might have some element to it. Maybe not, but anyways, it could be possible, but I don't know if we'll see it. And then finally here we got a couple theories on what Yuji might do to ultimately end things here. And first up from Mr. Orange Juice, he wonders if Yuji could eat Sukuna, thus fulfilling his role as vessel and taking them both out at the same time. And I certainly think so. That would be very poetic. However, I think something has to happen before that happens, because I don't see Yuji just eating Megami, since Sukuna is in Megami's body. But if they can get him out somehow, or somehow get him back into a cursed object or something, then yeah, certainly I could see that. And All That Found wants to know if Yuji could do a sacrificial binding vow to make Sukuna stronger, perhaps to beat the merger if like all hope was lost. So I could see Yuji making a sacrificial play in that way, like if the circumstances were dire enough, but I don't ever see Sukuna accepting it. It just feels too far beneath him. Out of time, but thank you so much for watching.